expanding his kingdom, conquering Mercia and Northumbria. The Battle of Ellendun had not just secured Egbert's place as the supreme ruler of Wessex, it had set the stage for the expansion of his kingdom. With the Mercian threat neutralized, Egbert now had the opportunity to broaden his influence, not just over his own realm, but over the entire island of Britain. His dream of a united England was within reach, but the path ahead was fraught with challenges. The battle for dominance in the south was won, but Mercia was not the only kingdom Egbert had to reckon with. The next great frontier in Egbert's campaign lay to the north, Northumbria. Unlike Mercia, which had been beaten in open battle, Northumbria was a different beast altogether. The Northumbrians had long been a powerful and independent force in England, with their own kings, traditions, and military might. Their kingdom stretched from the river Humber to the northernmost reaches of England. And although Egbert had already shown his prowess as a conqueror, the task of subduing the Northumbrians would not be so easily won. In 829 AD, Egbert marched north with a large army, intent on bringing Northumbria under his control. His victory at Ellendun had earned him a reputation, but this was a much more dangerous endeavor. The Northumbrian kings, particularly Ethelred and his successor Louis the Pious, had been engaged in political struggles of their own, and their kingdom was far from unified. But Egbert saw an opportunity, and in true strategic fashion, he seized it. The campaign was swift. With his experienced army and a series of carefully orchestrated alliances, Egbert marched into Northumbria, securing military victories over the fragmented Northumbrian forces. The Northumbrian king, Ethelred, though powerful, was not prepared to fight a united front. Egbert's victory was overwhelming. The Northumbrians, unable to resist the combined might of Wessex, were forced to submit. By the end of the campaign, Egbert had gained control over Northumbria. His influence spread across the north, and the once independent kingdom now became a vassal of Wessex. This victory was significant not just for the expansion of Egbert's realm, but for the message it sent across England. Egbert was no longer just a king of Wessex. He was now recognized as the most powerful ruler in England, the man who had united the southern kingdoms and brought the northern regions under his sway. Egbert's conquest of Northumbria was the first step toward the creation of a unified England, one that would have a single ruler, a single crown, and one central government. The conquest of Northumbria also had significant long-term effects on the political landscape of England. It created a model for future kings, a model that emphasized centralized authority and a strong, unified state. Egbert, though still facing challenges from the Vikings, had laid the groundwork for a united England that would flourish in the years to come. But Egbert knew that power in the north was still precarious. He needed to ensure that his influence would remain intact in the face of any rebellion or external threat. Egbert's victory over Northumbria was not the only military campaign that marked his reign. In 830 AD, he turned his attention to Mercia once again. Though he had defeated them at Ellendun, the Mercian kingdom had not been completely subdued. Their king, Wiglaf, had continued to hold power in the central part of England. Egbert, now deeply invested in uniting the entire island under his rule, could not afford to leave such a strong rival unchecked. Egbert's second campaign against Mercia was marked by a more diplomatic approach. Rather than engage in a full-scale war, Egbert leveraged his position to force Mercian submission. By 832 AD, Mercia had officially become a vassal kingdom under Egbert's control. Egbert was now the dominant king in England, with his influence stretching from the north to the south and from the east to the west. He was the king who had transformed Wessex from a fractured, threatened kingdom into the core of a united England. Yet even as Egbert's power expanded, he faced constant pressure from external forces. The Vikings, who had begun their raids on England in the 8th century, were a growing threat that would soon turn into a full-scale invasion. Egbert understood the necessity of preparing his kingdom for the coming storm. While Mercia and Northumbria were now under his rule, the Viking raids were a reminder that his work was far from over. In response to this, Egbert began fortifying key positions across his kingdom, building defensive walls, establishing watchtowers, and organizing his forces to be ready for a Viking assault. His vision was clear. The survival of a unified England would require both military might and strategic governance. The battle for England was not yet won, but Egbert had put the pieces in place for future kings to continue his work. As the Viking threat loomed, Egbert's early expansion efforts would shape the destiny of the English people. The groundwork had been laid for a kingdom that would stand strong in the face of invasion, a kingdom that would one day be united under the banner of the English crown. But for now, Egbert's reign remained one of conquest, diplomacy, and the steady consolidation of power. Governance and challenges. Leading a unified kingdom. After the dramatic victories over Mercia and Northumbria and the expansion of his kingdom, Egbert's reign had entered a new phase, one of governance, consolidation, and leadership. However, with the vast territories now under his control, Egbert's role as king had become increasingly complex. A kingdom once divided into rival factions and plagued by external threats was now united. But the challenges of leadership and maintaining order were only beginning. Egbert had achieved a remarkable feat in uniting much of England under one crown. His reign symbolized the beginning of a unified England, but this unity came with significant responsibilities. The internal governance of such a sprawling kingdom would prove to be as difficult as his military conquests. At the heart of Egbert's governance was his centralized system of power. Unlike the loosely organized kingdoms of the past, Egbert sought to create a system where power was concentrated in the hands of the king. Egbert's success in centralization was pivotal to the creation of a more unified state. He began to reform the system of local governance, assigning trusted nobles to key regions, ensuring that his influence was felt throughout the kingdom. But even as his power grew, he faced constant tensions between local rulers and the central authority of the king. To maintain control over his expanded territories, Egbert needed to balance his relationships with the local nobility. He understood that while loyalty to the crown was essential, the local lords still held significant power in their own right. They commanded armies, controlled vast swaths of land, and wielded political influence. Egbert's ability to manage this delicate balance between royal authority and local autonomy was key to his success. He relied on strategic alliances through marriage, land grants, and favors, securing the loyalty of his nobles while maintaining his own supremacy.
Another major challenge was the integration of the newly conquered territories. Though Mercia and Northumbria were now under his rule, their people had long been accustomed to their own systems of government and traditions. Egbert needed to ensure that these regions were integrated into the fabric of Wessex, without causing resentment or rebellion. It was a delicate task, one that required sensitive diplomacy and astute decision-making. Egbert's approach to governance was not only about control, it was also about consolidation. He worked to strengthen the kingdom's legal system and improve communication between different regions. This was crucial to maintaining order across his vast lands. Writs were issued to ensure that laws were enforced uniformly, and officials were appointed to manage the affairs of different regions. Egbert also focused on creating stronger military defenses to protect the kingdom from external threats. His extensive fortification efforts, including the construction of watchtowers and fortresses along key borders, served as a testament to his foresight and determination. However, Egbert's reign was not free from opposition. The Vikings continued to raid England's coasts, bringing with them violence and destruction. The Danes, in particular, were relentless in their attacks, And even as Egbert expanded his kingdom and solidified his rule, the threat of Viking invasion was ever present. The Viking raids were a source of constant pressure on Egbert's military and financial resources, forcing him to remain vigilant and prepared. Egbert's ability to respond to this threat was crucial. He knew that he needed more than just strong defenses. He needed a unified response from all the kingdoms he had conquered. This meant working closely with the newly subjugated regions, ensuring that they could contribute to the defense of the kingdom. His alliances with Northumbria and Mercia were tested, as they now had to face a common enemy, the Vikings.
But Egbert's leadership in organizing a coordinated defense against Viking invasions was one of his greatest strengths. His ability to unite disparate regions and coordinate their defense efforts was a testament to his political acumen. Despite his efforts, the constant threat of Viking invasions took a toll on Egbert's kingdom. By 835 AD, the Viking raids were becoming more frequent and more organized, threatening the very fabric of Egbert's kingdom. The raiders not only sought to plunder, but also to establish permanent settlements. The Viking presence in England continued to grow, and in 836 AD, the Vikings launched a major raid on Wessex itself, attacking the city of Exeter and causing significant damage. Egbert responded with swift military action, but the Viking threat would remain a constant for the remainder of his reign. The raids were a reminder that the peace and unity Egbert had worked so hard to achieve were fragile, and that the future of his kingdom rested on his ability to adapt to the changing dynamics of warfare and politics. Despite these challenges, Egbert's reign marked a pivotal moment in the history of England. His rule represented the first true effort at a unified England, a country that would, in the future, stand as a powerful force on the world stage. But the challenges he faced in governance were far from over. Even in the face of Viking raids, internal divisions, and the burdens of leadership, Egbert's legacy as a foundational figure in English history would remain secure. Through his military conquests, political reforms, and strategic alliances, Egbert had created the framework for a kingdom that would endure long after his death. His reign was a testament to the power of vision, and though he passed away in 839 AD, the groundwork he laid would continue to shape the future of England for centuries.
The final years and death. The legacy of Egbert of Wessex. As Egbert of Wessex entered the twilight years of his reign, the weight of his accomplishments was clear. His kingdom had transformed from a fragmented land of rival kingdoms to a united, formidable force. Yet, despite his success, the final years of Egbert's life were not without their struggles. The Viking threat, the constant demands of governance, and the pressure of maintaining control over the vast territories he had conquered took their toll on the aging king. By the time Egbert reached his 60s, the challenges of leadership were no longer just about military conquest. He had already established Wessex as the most powerful kingdom in southern England, with Mercia and Northumbria now under his influence. But the Viking raids were intensifying, and the very idea of a unified England, one that Egbert had spent so much of his life trying to forge, remained tenuous. Egbert understood that he had built a kingdom that was strong, but its future was far from guaranteed. The Vikings were not merely invaders, they were a growing force, and the very nature of England's political landscape was changing. As he aged, Egbert's health began to decline, but his determination never wavered. Even in his later years, he continued to lead with the same ambition that had carried him to the throne of Wessex. In 839 AD, Egbert took one final step to secure his legacy. He appointed his son Aethelwulf as his successor. The passing of the crown to his son was a crucial moment in the history of England, for it marked the continuation of Egbert's vision for a united kingdom. Egbert had no illusions about the challenges his son would face, but he trusted Aethelwulf to continue his work.
The transfer of power was not entirely smooth. Aethelwulf, while capable, had not faced the same struggles as his father. He was a prince raised in a time of relative peace,
and the heavy mantle of leadership fell upon his shoulders with the burden of maintaining the kingdom's fragile unity. But Egbert had prepared him for the role, instilling in him the same strategic brilliance, resolve, and ambition that had defined Egbert's own reign. Despite the transition, Egbert's death in 839 AD marked the end of an era. His reign had laid the foundation for the eventual unification of England under one crown. But even after his death, his legacy remained ever present. In the decades following his death, his descendants would continue to build upon the kingdom he had created. His grandson, Alfred the Great, would rise to become one of the most famous and revered kings in English history, continuing the work Egbert had started. Egbert's final years were not marked by large military campaigns or political upheaval. Instead, he focused on consolidating his reign and ensuring that his kingdom would remain strong in the face of external threats. His reign had seen the beginning of a new era for Wessex and for England, but it was not without its costs. The Vikings continued to be a persistent threat, and the kingdom's unity was never fully secure. Yet, Egbert's ability to maintain control over the core of England, Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria, would be remembered as his greatest achievement. Egbert's death was not just the loss of a king, it was the loss of the man who had reshaped the future of England. His vision of a unified England, though not fully realized in his lifetime, would inspire future generations. The kingdom he had established would continue to grow, and the dream he had nurtured for so long would come to fruition in the hands of his descendants. Egbert had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a determined leader could unite a fractured world. He had fought against Viking invaders, rival kings, and political factions, yet his greatest triumph was in uniting the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into one realm under one crown.
His name would be remembered not just as a conqueror, but as the first king to bring much of England together. His success lay not in any one victory, but in his ability to navigate the complex web of politics, war, and diplomacy to build a lasting kingdom. In the years that followed his death, Egbert's legacy would be celebrated, not just as a king, but as a foundational figure in English history. His descendants, most notably Alfred the Great, would continue to carry the torch of unity and resilience that Egbert had ignited. And though Egbert did not live to see a fully unified England, his dream lived on. The kingdom he had built laid the groundwork for the eventual emergence of a single, powerful England, one that would stand firm against external threats, and one that would shape the destiny of the British Isles for centuries to come. Egbert's death may have marked the end of his reign, but it was not the end of his influence. His reign had forever altered the course of English history, and his vision for a united England would be the driving force for future kings. As his son Aethelwulf ascended to the throne, Egbert's legacy was secure. He had done what no one before him had been able to do. He had laid the foundation for a unified England.